What brought me to where I'm at was I had a gigantic death of my identity 20 years ago. I had turned 40, had a high-end corporate job, and in a matter of 2 months, my now ex-wife and my ex-wife asked for a divorce. I lost my high-end corporate job, and shortly thereafter, I got wiped out in the market crash of 2008.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And in this episode, we're going to talk with my new friend, Jonathon. How do you rebuild a life that has collapsed? How do you create the structure, the framework, the scaffolding to rebuild? And what do you bring with you from your past life into this life when you rebuild? And what do you let go of so that you can rebuild fresh? What do you need to bring with you so that it can be stronger than before? This is a fantastic yik yak. Really interesting, spiritual, insightful, thoughtful, brave man. It's a marvelous conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. Well, all right, Jonathon Aslay, welcome in.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I mean, I was just thinking, do we want to go down to who am I? And I was thinking, well, I would just say I'm a spiritual being having a human experience.
I love it. That's a great place to start. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. But I mean, professionally, I'm a dating and relationship coach.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for 15 years, predominantly working with women in midlife to help them understand men in midlife. And that's but I've branched off since then. I've written a book about self-love. I'm a big proponent of spirituality, based on what I just shared a moment ago, and trying to figure out there is no spoon.
All right. So first I want to unpack a little bit. I want to get to spirituality later, but tell me about what you mean when you say there is no spoon.
Oh, well, it's a reference to the Matrix and the concept that, we can create our own reality, or at least that's the way I interpret that reference. So, we all, I believe, have superpowers if we can learn how to remove all the blocks within ourselves. We can actually tap into those superpowers.
Sure. I think the studies have indicated that we're only using a small percentage of our brain, right?
Yeah.
It's like 4 to 6% or something like that. Yeah. I don't even know the percentage wise. But what I do know, Jonathon, is my mind goes into really interesting places, especially when I sleep. So I have very lucid dreams. There's no reason for you to know this, but I do. My dreams are extremely lucid. They're incredibly rich and detailed. And there are times when I remember them every night. Every morning when I wake up, I remember what happened in my dreams. And I was actually telling my daughter a couple nights ago, I had this really fantastic, interesting dream. And you know how dreams connect one scene to the next, right? Even less than abrupt than a movie. All these transitions in your dreams seem to make sense, right? You move from one place to the next, and I had this really fantastic, interesting, creative dream. And I remember waking up and remembering the scenes and thinking, this was such a fantastically interesting dream. I'm not going to bore the audience or you with this, but it involved having a sea lion as a dog pet and running around. And it connects all these little things in my mind that I was thinking of, and I could draw the references. But I just woke up, Jonathan, where I was so, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, in awe of my mind and what it was capable of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Have you ever done psychedelics?
I have not. Have you?
Oh my God. Well, that takes it to a whole nother level.
Have you done, what is it, ayahuasca? Is that it?
Well, so I've done ayahuasca, but my plant of choice happens to be psilocybin. And what inspired me to do it, actually, I mean, we could go down this one rabbit hole.
Of course.
Was when my for those listening, I lost my 19-year-old son 7 years ago to an accident.
Oh shit!
And
I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No, I mean, I'm in good place with it all. And I'm not laughing at it. I'm just in such a good place. But one of the reasons why I chose to do a medicine ceremony was I wanted to connect to the other side, or at least that's the way I went into it. And I had a clear visitation from him and or at least the impression of that. And what's interesting is that the medicine can tap us, these natural, ancestral, from the earth, Mother Earth medicines like an ayahuasca or a psilocybin or some of the other ones that are available can take us to places that we wouldn't otherwise go in our waking state. And certainly, when you think of lucid dreams, I immediately thought of the movie Inception,
right?
Where, Leonardo DiCaprio talks about creating worlds and that sort of thing. And when you were talking about using our brain power, I was thinking of the movie Lucy, where Scarlett Johansson is able to tap into 100% of her cerebral capacity. In fact, I literally watched it yesterday, about 20 minutes of it. Well, I was studying something, a book, or there's this book on the concept that we live in a hologram and the power of our brain. And it made me go, okay, I'm just going to go watch a few minutes of it. So, and I'll say from a spiritual perspective, and the reason why I'm going there is I think we all have a connection to our divinity, if you will, something beyond ourselves. I mean, I genuinely believe that. And trying some of these medicines allow one to connect to those portals, the astral plane and different places. So this is the fun rabbit holes I like to go down.
Yeah, well, the thing of it is, it's a rabbit hole, Jonathan, quite honestly, that millions of human beings through hundreds of thousands of years have gone through, right? Every single culture, every culture has gone through some type of connector, some type of process, some type of ceremony, oftentimes with the help of an aid, whether it's beer or mushrooms or, these other various things, right? But Native Americans did it. Chinese did it. Egyptians did. Everybody went through these areas, and there's a really interesting human yen, I believe, to tap into something that's bigger and broader and beyond what we see around us all the time. I think that the proliferation of not just evidence that has been talked about anecdotally, but the evidence that every culture has pursued this connection. And some might say, well, it's just a fear of dying, right? That's just it. It's just you're afraid to die and everyone wants to know what's next. And so this is our path to it. That could be an answer or an explanation. For me personally, that doesn't satisfy me enough. I don't think that that's enough of it. I think that there has been so many anecdotal references that human beings have where they say, and I don't even think people are looking for signs. I'll give you a good example. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a memorial service for my friend's mother. She's 95 years old and she passed. And so he said, hey, we're going to get on Zoom and talk. And so I knew her. And so I said a few things, but this one guy said, I was always golfing with her, right? And when I was younger, and so I mean, she was 95, so he was young when he was golfing. He would golf a lot with her, and he said, when he heard that she had passed, he said, "Okay, I'm gonna line up this shot. I'm just gonna chip this in for Nancy," and it was like a 3 driver. And it was a long shot, right? It was a three iron, which if anyone knows golf, it's on the fairway. It's a long ways away.
Yeah.
And once you know it, it's a fucking hole in one. Once you know it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said something though. It's certainly the fear of death or the curiosity of what happens when we transition on some level is one of the real blessings of, I think, of choosing to go down these modalities, because I believe when we overcome our fear of death and when we embrace that death is just merely a transition or portal to a different existence, that being able to take that on without the fear can really change a person's life when they operate from, because when you think of every core fear, like if you get granular to every fear, at the base of it is death.
Right.
Like it might be, I'm afraid of jumping out of an airplane because I'm going to die.
Right.
I'm afraid to get married because I'll die, the metaphoric death
right.
of the individual, So when we look at the core of every fear, I think is death. So that's why I love the work of Ram Dass, and I mean, he started with LSD as his modality with him and Timothy Leary to I don't want to say overcome it, but to embrace if we think of death as merely a transition. And what's interesting and what brought me to where I'm at was I had a gigantic death of my identity 20 years ago. I had turned 40, had a high-end corporate job, and in a matter of 2 months, my now ex-wife and my ex-wife asked for a divorce. I lost my high-end corporate job, and shortly thereafter, I got wiped out in the market crash of 2008. And my identity of who I was decimated. I had literally died from an old version of me that was very performative, that was very ego-driven, that was belief that financial success was the key to happiness. Greed is good was my mantra from the movie Wall Street, because I grew up right in the heart of that movie. I mean, I was in my mid-20s when that movie came out. And that death, if you will, began a whole new path for me. And for years, I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. I mean, like, that's how painful that death of identity was. And I had 2 small children at the time. And I mean, I would go, I would do cocaine, I would do alcohol, and I did online dating as my drug of choice too.
Oh my God. So that's, so if anyone knows a movie called The Mighty Wind, it's one of those documentary, parody movies that Christopher Guest does. And there's one, right? So there's this one shot with Fred Willard, who's this, goofy, clueless promoter. And he had this show called What Happened? He says, you do this skit and then someone throws water at you and you look around and say, what happened? He thought it was hilarious. Yeah. But I hear you, Jonathan. I'm like, what happened? Oh my gosh. Right. This cataclysmic destruction of your identity. I thought that, you phrased it really, really elegantly that you had died. Right. This identity of yours had died. And I kind of, some people ascribe to the Buddhist philosophy, which purports that we have multiple lives, that we go through multiple lives. But you could also argue, I think, that you have multiple lives within a life, that you have
Oh, yeah.
a life, and then you move on to another life, and then you move on to another
Yeah.
life, and you take with you some things from the previous life, but then it reconstructs and is moved on, and you shape a new one. And it's really it's serendipitous that you said this, because I was reading my Marcus Aurelius last night. I'm kind of diving into the
Okay.
OG Stoic, right?
Yeah.
And he said, it was so interesting. Just last night, I read this passage where he said, "We die when we're children and go to adults. Our childhood dies. We die
Yeah.
when we're a mature man and go to an elder man. Like that mature
Yeah.
man dies and you move on to this. So we weren't afraid to go from childhood to adulthood. Why would we be afraid at the end of our corporeal life to the next stage? It's just the next
Yeah.
stage, just like we are." And so for you, you just said, I'm going to go into some cocaine, some alcohol, some online dating, but that at one identity died, and there must have been some transition that had to happen as you kind of reincarnated to a new life. It's like you went into that Buddha's concept of the bardo, that is your
Yeah.
in-between life, right?
Yeah.
So how long were you there?
So, it's interesting because I think of the idea that our cells regenerate every 7 years. And then I think of how things happen in threes. So if we go, the first 21 years of our life was built, the scripts that we learned from childhood, from our parents, that we've adopted from society, from culture, that sort of thing, that frames the first 21 years of our life. And then the next 21 years of our life is living that script that we had. And the reason why I say this is that puts us square at 42. And when I had my crash, I was 42 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay, well, my first 21 years was this. And then the next 21 years, because I'm now 63 as of literally a few months ago, I've been going through what Alison Armstrong calls the tunnel. And this would be the hero's journey that
Sure.
that Joseph Campbell talks about. And at first, I was in the dark wilderness. I was doing
Absolutely.
cocaine. I was
You were
doing
in the
drugs.
woods.
Alcohol. I was online dating. I lost all my money. I was literally, at one point, I had to move in with my mom and dad in a retirement community. And Chris, I used to live, when I was married, I was in a $2.2 million home in Palos Verdes, Los Angeles. So to go from that to a 100 square foot bedroom in my mom and dad's retirement community,
goodness.
like that's how low I got.
That you know what? That is an unbelievable transition, right? I mean, Palos Verdes is a place, and
yeah,
that is a testament to you that you didn't break. Like you didn't. Well, I mean, you might have felt broken, but you didn't break apart, or maybe you did.
It's interesting because I was like running out of money, and at this point, like my whatever savings I had kept dwindling. And at this time, well, a couple things were going on. My online dating addiction, I didn't realize, was preparing me for the next evolution of my life.
Okay.
So for about 5 years, I was highly depressed, not depressed like I was addicted. Like the addiction was more self-medication. And I differentiate it because the cocaine, the alcohol, the dating was like to self-soothe. It wasn't because of an addiction. It was because I was in pain. And the minute I began building my identity, and when I literally one day said, I'm going to become a dating and relationship coach. And I said it to all, by the way, most of my friends that I went to, like hung out with. I mean, one is worth $100 million, owns a multi-million dollar company, that sort of thing. Lots of successful friends. And one day I go, one's the head of CBS animation department. Like, I have a circle of pretty cool friends. And I'm like, here, I'm like broke, living with mom and dad. And I go, I'm going to become a dating and relationship coach. And they looked at me like, yeah, right. And, and I can only say this now looking back, I've been on Katie Couric's show. I've been on television. I have a YouTube channel with 200,000 subscribers. I'm considered one of the top people in my field. And it just started with an intention 15 years ago. And what happened 15 years ago, a little bit before that, the movie The Secret had come out in 2006. And I remember watching it going, this feels very familiar to me. The law of attraction, mindset. And, I started to consume people like Wayne Dyer, Abraham Hicks, Joe Dispenza, just to name a few. God, I could go through the litany of all the people that I love to listen to even till today. And it began rewiring me. It was like I was building emotional scaffolding from this building that was, the 9/11,
right. The 9/11 of your life. Absolutely. It was the 9/11 of your life.
And now I'm building it my life, but with scaffolding. And that emotional scaffolding was because I did personal development. I did self-help. I did spiritual work. I did therapy to build the emotional scaffolding. So by the time, as I shared earlier, I lost my son in 2018. Most people, and I know you have children, so just even hearing that, I know what it's like to feel that viscerally. Okay, yeah. Because I was at the other end of that years ago when I learned of someone who lost a child. I knew I could feel it in an internalized way. Well, now this has been my experience. But because I built this emotional scaffolding, it didn't tear me apart. Painful, no doubt. Still, there's a sadness in me. But I also turned his loss into an inspiration for me. The book that's right behind me, I wrote my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway?
Nice.
A journey of personal development, self-help, spiritual work, based on, or at least inspired by, my son. And what I mean is, in his honor, I lived life to the fullest because that's what he would want. And I remembered even when I gave his eulogy, I looked at everybody, all the people that were at the church or at the service, excuse me. I said, look, we can grieve with suffering or we can grieve with love. Yeah. And I'm choosing love, and I'm inviting everyone. How can we love more? How can we love ourselves more? How can we love our neighbor more? And just to encourage more love. And yes, this is a tragedy and sadness, but I want it to be fuel for more good. And so, coming back to, I had a crash, there's no doubt. I had another painful thing happen with my son. And then I've had another thing. But you know what? I fall down and I get back up. And my point of bringing this up is, Chris, is that we oftentimes don't feel like we can get back up when we fall down.
Right.
But if we look throughout our lives, most of us have had a variety of different fall downs, if you will. And if we trust that we're going to get up the next time, I know I'm going to fall down again at some point,
of course,
but I trust I'll just get back up. In other words, I come from a place of knowing that I'll just until I transition,
right?
Then I'll get up to it. Then I'll transition.
Then you'll get up to something else, right? You'll get up to something else. So I like that a lot. And part of it, I think stems from our deep early childhood, because one of the things that I marvel at when I see young kids is when they're first starting to walk, right? They're cruising along and then they figure out, they're looking at mom and dad and everyone's walking on 2 feet. They're like, that's interesting. Can I do that? And then instinctively they start getting up, cruising and holding on to things. And then there's a moment where they stand on their own 2 feet and they're like, oh, well, of course, what happens when you do? Bonk.
Yeah.
But you get up again, and you wobble and you take those first steps, which is to me a beautiful unconscious leap of faith for that youngster, right? No, we don't, none of us remember doing that, but we did that, right? It's a leap of faith to say, I'm going to transfer my gravity from this foot to the other foot. Oh my, blah, and you fall down. But getting up, it seems to be a natural instinct that we have as humans. And there's, maybe it's a survival instinct, Jonathon, where we know that we have to rebuild. And I think your metaphor of rebuilding the scaffolding is really elegant, because, you have this architecture that when you're trying to rebuild. I guess a question for you is, when you keep that metaphor going, as you rebuild your identity, Did you have a blueprint, or were you doing it kind of scaffold by scaffold, brick by brick?
It's a great question. So, and to the extent that I want to take a step backward for a second, because when we think of identity, oftentimes
It's a
people
big
think of
word.
their, particularly men, like we were
Mhm.
raised with a blueprint, or women as well. But, for those of us who are baby boomers or Gen Xers, I'm a tail end baby boomer. I was raised with go to college, get a job, meet someone, get married, buy a house, start a family. That was what the
The
makeup of my
Well, you
identity.
said it was the script. That was the script for your
Script.
first
Yeah.
21 years that you
Yeah.
kind of read that someone else wrote.
And then living that script for another 21 years. And then my reality collided with my blueprint, that script. And again, my identity was tied into a script that someone else wrote for me.
Right.
So as I move forward, it's interesting because that script was really big on financial success and being a big shot, materialism. Like that was where that script lied. And going forward, when you literally broke, and starting from scratch, I no longer was motivated by the material things.
Hmm.
And so what motivated me, was at first, it's funny, when I first started coaching, I did it for Starbucks cards. I go, buy me a $25 Starbucks card. It was like, so there was some exchange of energy
Sure.
kind of thing. And then eventually it morphed into,
A
compensation for what I
livelihood.
do. But for me, I'm a junkie for understanding human behavior and human pair bonding in particular. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with how absolutely absurdly dysfunctional human beings can be in this thing we call dating, mating, relating. I'm fascinated at behavior. And so I'm always looking, even to this day, and I'm in a fantastic relationship. I'm always looking how to make it better, how to make it better, how to make it better kind of thing. I'm just, and better isn't even the right word, but happier,
Closer, right? Happier,
healthier.
right? Healthier.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to reframe those words. So
Yeah.
so that's what drove me. And honestly, I stopped doing 5-year plans. I stopped, sometimes I throw up a goal for fun, but my goal is just to keep, and this is going to sound cheesy, but I just keep moving forward and trust that I'll be guided into directions, into rabbit holes that are going to. By the way, I'm looking at an ocean view right now at my condo.
Congratulations.
I mean, where I live. I've got a fantastic relationship. I have a business that I'm very grateful for. And at the same time, I'm not attached to this. I could literally, if a fire took all this away, I mean, the only thing I'd want is my computer because it has my passwords and stuff in it.
I want to pause right there because that's a really interesting idea. And I apologize for referencing Marcus Aurelius again, or some of the Stoics.
No
It's just
problem.
that I've been reading them a lot lately.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that they bubble up when I've got conversations like this, where they talk about if you can get by with less, if you can learn how to have less, if you can learn how to be less,
Yeah.
well, then when something happens and you have less, you'll be okay, right? You'll be okay. Like you just said, you're not attached to the stuff that's there because you've had less and you have experienced that. And I really want to really dive into what you just talked about, where as you now have rebuilt your life with not necessarily a plan, but if this lands poorly, Jonathan, please forgive me. But
Sure.
you've been vulnerable to letting the universe kind of lay down a path for you that you can walk on, right? You've
Yeah.
been open to saying, maybe I'm not the one that's going to control everything, but I'm going to be tuned in to what I'm being provided and offered. Does that
Yeah.
sound right?
No, yeah, that's actually beautifully stated. And to that degree, just trust. That's why the real where I got hung up was the concept of productivity, the concept of achievement, and all of these things. And, my value was tied to that. And when I let go of being productive, and that doesn't mean I'm not productive, it's just, it's that if I just took off and spent 6 hours and just wanted the middle of a Wednesday and binge watch something, and I just did it because I wanted to do it, not beat myself up that I wasn't productive, that I didn't move towards some sort of gigantic goal of making, like making tons of money or making a difference in the world, and learning to just be and allowing kind of intuition, if you will, like you just said, drive the bus. And I wake up like I said, I when I let go of goals, and I know this goes against Tony Robbins and every other teacher out there, but when I let go of all that, I just started to feel more relaxed. And I wake up going, what's going to inspire me today? And I just let whatever path takes off for me.
We'll be right back. Yeah, you know what though, that is in it's a really interesting place to be. Athletes call it the zone, right?
Yeah.
When they have into this state of hyper awareness of what's happening on the court or on the field or whatever, where they are sensing what's happening with other people moving, so they know where to go. It's very hard for us to be in that space all the time, but the wisest and the seemingly the most happiest are the folks who have that state of flow throughout their whole life. They open themselves up to, what's going to happen. It doesn't mean that there's no plan at all, that they are completely clueless about where to go, but that they pay attention to the signs that are happening all around them and move in, and so I have a question about that.
Sure.
Then. Like when you started to rebuild your identity, so one of the Buddhist metaphors is a candle.
Yeah.
Like you have a candle, and when this life goes, you have another candle, and the first candle goes out. But the light from that first candle lit that second candle.
Yeah.
Right? There's something that carried over. As you started to rebuild your identity, what did you take with you from that first life?
Wow. I haven't really thought about that question. I took a lot of baggage. I mean, well, to some degree, though my identity that I had formed up until that point still had a ton of residue that I spent the next really 42, or the next 21 years when that all happened, that residue still carried with me. And it's like peeling an onion, I've been peeling layer by layer, and to this day, I still peel more and more. But now I share more of my experiences coming back to, I think I think if you think of the life in 21s, when you hit 63, you hit that elder stage where I can pass my experiences on to younger people. I was just working earlier today with a 32-year-old woman, helping her with her relationship, and I can do it from this wise elder place.
Sure.
But what did I take? Oh my God. Please forgive me because I'm focused on all the bad stuff and I'm trying to think of some of the good stuff.
Has to,
you know what? I think I've always had a good heart. At the core, I've had a good heart. My girlfriend said to me the other day, we were just sitting on the couch, and she goes, "You have such a good heart." And I think it's always been there. I think we all have a good heart, quite frankly. And what I mean is compassion, empathy, caring, understanding. I think we all have it within us, but it's been oftentimes shrouded by a lot of, scripts and armor and mud and plaster and all that stuff. And so I've spent the last 21 years really just peeling away all those layers, because that's what I had all along anyway.
Right. It's interesting that when, I love this idea, like when you rebuild you're like, okay, but the core of me is what I can take with me because that's what's left. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, um, from the science fiction book Dune, where he says, I'm going to face my fear. I'm going to let my fear pass through me, and then
Yeah.
only I will remain, right? When you rebuild your life, you still have to rebuild it from something. And maybe the core of it was that good heart,
Yeah.
and so my wife was so interesting. She's super interesting. And she said, I'm really in this stage where I'm going to let go of things that don't serve me to make room for things that do.
Sure.
When you moved on into this new identity, what did you let go of, right? What was the stuff that you consciously said that's in that past life, and that's not coming with me on this life?
Yeah, I would say the concept of the performative nature of life, that it's almost,
Mm.
in from the perspective of doing it for others instead of oneself, just simply being that, because in many ways, the scripts that we were raised with our parents meant to instill them or not, there was an element of they wanted us to have a better life than them. So there was a pushing along that way to do better,
Mm-hmm.
not to do what I wanted. Because, I mean, and I don't mean like play golf or be a fireman or whatnot. I'm just talking about what it's like to just be. And so one of the things, like I said, when I let go of the notion of productivity, when I let go of the notion of comparing myself, like I shared with you, I have friends who are extremely wealthy, successful, and all that. I don't compare myself to them one bit. you
That's
know
awesome.
I mean, and by the way, that's hard for us men to do because we're competitive
Very
creatures.
hard.
And I mean, the only time I really get competitive is when we play our $20 poker game, and I can be a prick during those games. And I'm like, for just $20, I'm being an asshole. And what I mean to say is, I get so competitive.
Sure.
That I try not to be in that competitive nature and let go of productivity and the expectations. That doesn't mean that I'm knocking anyone who has a drive. I do believe we all need a North Star, like what our purpose is. And whatever that is for you, I mean, I think it's important to have a sense of purpose in your life.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's simply making a difference in people's lives. I made it very simple. It's not predicated on financial wealth. It's created by how many lives I can make a difference in. And I'm not driven from that perspective. Um, and I mean, and I'm no disrespect for those that have that
Sure.
drive. I just don't need it anymore the way I used to. And
Yeah.
now what matters most is I can spend an entire day with my beloved, and we can go we can spend like 9 hours going down rabbit holes of psychology and
Yeah.
philosophy. And we're into this new not a new, but this Netflix series called Dark, which is about time travel. It's a German series. And like it takes us 2 hours to finish a 50-minute episode because we're always
Because we're
stopping it, and
stopping.
we're going down curiosity. What do you think about this? And blah, 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 blah. Like,
That's
to me,
excellent.
that's the juice of life. I don't need to put my
Yeah.
finger on the Eiffel Tower to feel like I've experienced life. It's not about what I see. It's how I am
Yeah.
being.
Right. And I think that couple, first of all, I love that perspective, Jonathan. And I also love some of the tropes or the archetypes that you spoke about where, men feel a need to be competitive. I was just talking with a man earlier about this thing that we've got, right, to compete. And maybe it's this primal thing because we have to find the mate that we want. And there's this genetic thing that's pushed up. And even lobsters have it, right? Male lobsters like, I'm going to find the lobster, blah, blah, blah. And so maybe that's something we can't get away from an instinctive perspective, but we can get away from that from a mental perspective. The one thing that separates humans from lobsters is that we have pretty good rational, reasonable minds versus a lobster, right? I mean, we can do more things than they can do. And so our mind can be the ones that says, okay, I can maybe understand my instinct and appreciate that competitive instinct, but I can also think about and rationalize that to where I can compete, but maybe I'm just competing with myself, right? This this one interesting book I read by Jordan Peterson about the 10 laws of living or blah blah blah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but one of the things that I loved, he said, don't compare yourself to others, compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is such a small, powerful, elegant phrase of that, that idea of I'm going to compete against my past life, who I was before,
Yeah.
and what I can move on now. And I guess that must help you, I would imagine, when you talk to women about relationships, about, men having this struggle in their lives to where they have to compete to show up, but at the same time, not compete to piss somebody off, right? How do you be assertive and strong without being an asshole?
Yeah.
Right? It's a challenge.
Well, it's interesting because I try to share my coaching was really to help women. It started off with helping to understand what the emotional effects of going through a divorce what men might be experiencing and what to be prepared to look for. That's how my coaching started. It was,
Sure.
My website was Understand Men Now, particularly that 40-year-old man that was going through this experience.
Because you understood that, man, you were a 40-year-old man that went through that divorce and massive shock.
I had a $250,000 a year job, $2 million home, living with my mom and dad and broke. So, and I understood.
My God.
Yeah. And add to that, alimony, child support, visitation rights, family court, erectile dysfunction, parents starting to eventually live in assisted living facilities, all of the
well, of course you had
effects.
ED because everything just shocked your whole system.
Yeah.
You were like, what
the blow didn't help either, by the way.
Right.
So but my point in sharing this, and particularly I know there's a lot of conversation, particularly in the dating marketplace, for the younger demographic, the 20-year-old men, the 30-year-old men, even the 40-year-old men. There's a lot of red pill conversations going on. There's a hyper focus on hypergamy and the sexual market value and all these things that men are hearing about relationships. And the need to be a high value man, that sort of thing, so you can get, the most attractive woman. That works in such a small subsegment of the population. The reality of what we're faced in, at least here in the United States, roughly 80% of the population makes less than a six-figure income. And it's probably, and it's even higher for a younger demographic when you average in the older demographic, for example, and only because you mentioned hypergamy earlier.
So tell me, I might have mentioned hypergamy, but I don't think I did. What is hypergamy?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? You mentioned Jordan Peterson. You said something, and that went where my brain went. Oh, it's the concept of women seeking men that have greater social status.
I get exactly
they
right.
Support that from a supportive perspective. So,
yes, that I understand.
Yeah, and so the thing is we as a society, from an emotional standpoint, are a walking wounded population of literally the Walking Dead on an emotional maturity level, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean people that can't pay their bills and that sort of thing. I'm talking about relationally speaking. We have a very dysfunctional population. Roughly the average millennials is a byproduct of divorce. For the most part, not every single one, but a high percentage, you being one of them. I grew up with parents that were married 66 years, before my mom passed away.
Congratulations.
That's the exception now versus the rule. My son, who's a millennial, is a byproduct of divorce. All his friends are a byproduct of divorce. Divorce is an emotionally traumatic experience, whether you're the two people going through it, and certainly for children. And we're talking about a young mind that may not be able to comprehend complex adult emotions, that they're experiencing this. And then they take this into their adulthood, oftentimes not very healed from these experiences. And certainly, so we have a population that has childhood wounds and adult traumas that many people have spent very little time actually addressing.
Mm.
And then we operate from the premise here in the United States is I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. We are such a codependent of affection, and God forbid it isn't delivered in the way it's on to the next, the next, the next. I mean, the average person today has had 5 or 6 significant relationships. And I'm saying a relationship that's 3 months or longer. That's significant. Multiple dating experiences. And people aren't really good at relationship. I'm generalizing here, Chris, so please forgive me. But
No,
they're not really good at it based on the evidence,
Right, based on the evidence. And also, too, I think that I thought you laid a really interesting case because all of this, what we do know to be true is that for Gen Xers, who was the latchkey generation, and then and towards the end of the boomers and into the Gen Xers, the divorce rates went up astronomically, significantly. And now to the place where half of marriages end in divorce. Well, if you have children, then half of those families walking around have experienced that kind of trauma that you talked about. And it does linger, right? We like it or not. I went through a lot of very strange family dynamics growing up. And what ended up happening for me, Jonathan, was that I ended up making choices that were the complete opposite. Right. And you're nodding your head because you knew exactly what I was going to do. One house, one spouse. I didn't move around a lot in my career. It's a handful of places that I worked my whole career. Is a couple of places, 2 places actually. And I needed to create that stability in my adulthood that I didn't get in my childhood. Right. So whether I knew it or not, I was actually a lot of my choices were informed about what I did. And so as you start thinking now for men and women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, seeking relationships with someone who's a little bit older, right? Who's a little bit more mature, but still maybe not fully to the place where they could and should be. Right. Because they, like you said, they haven't processed the stuff that they experienced in their childhood and their young adulthood.
You know what? Let me ask you this. I want your perception on this because what I've observed is most people enter into a relationship from a very unconscious place. It's not very intentional, and it's mostly focused. It starts off focusing on attraction, and there's attraction, and then we have to entertain one another through this attraction, which includes romance to kind of make it a little bit more exciting, and then that physical connection, without ever really establishing, do we share the same values with one another? Do we have the same vision? Do we have lifestyles can blend? Do we have even the emotional maturity? But what I see lacking, the one core fundamental, people will temporarily enter into relationships through this exciting period of chemistry, but they haven't really established a fucking awesome friendship. And I'm saying the words, is it okay that I say that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Fucking awesome friendship. Like that's the person you want to marry. Somebody that is your fucking awesome friend. Like you love hanging out with this person. You love shooting the shit with this person. You love to laugh with this person. You love to give each other shit. All of those juicy, delicious parts of friendship. And not too much shit, by the way.
But I like what you said, because what folks I think are looking for. I mean, human beings mate for life, we sort of want to, right? That's maybe a thought that, and even if we don't mate for life, this phrase of a soulmate wasn't arbitrarily created. I mean, we've been talking about soulmates in the history of human literature and culture, right? Where there's someone with you and there's someone there for you you're connected with, right? That you want to be connected with. People say the better half, like that means that they're a half, like that the two halves share a whole, right? I mean, that I think that even just the casual language of soulmate or my better half, there's a lot of implication. There's a lot of weight to that if you really think about the language. There's this a really terrific Netflix show called Nobody Wants This.
Oh, I love that. Love it.
I love that
New
show.
series
right?
coming out next week.
Exactly, season 2. And my wife and I just saw the preview. And it's such a well-written show. And she says, well, that's the dream, isn't it? Or he says, that's the dream, isn't it? You feel attracted to somebody you feel safe with.
Yeah.
You're attracted to someone that creates that safety and creates that wholeness. I think your idea of a relationship where if you're looking for that relationship, and hopefully when you're a little bit older, you get this, apply that perspective. You're looking for that fucking awesome friend that you're also attracted to.
Yeah. So coming back to the notion of soulmates, I've kind of subscribed it a couple different ways. So I have a quote, like a Jonathon quote, that says, soulmates come into our lives to teach us lessons, and our true love goes to school with us each and every day holding hands. And the school of life, that being. And the idea is that I'm a big fan of the movie Princess Bride and
Love
Wesley
the
and
Princess Bride.
But it calls true love, right? It's true love.
Right.
And so that's where my quote was birthed. And the idea is whether, from a spiritual perspective, whether we made soul contracts with people, had connections with people that we have in our lives from a romantic perspective, I think we have so many gifts that we can experience within each relationship. If we look at it from a place of growth, or from a place of learning, from a place of experiencing too. But then we connect with somebody who we genuinely both are feeling safe at the same time. Both are feeling, their ease to just be themselves. A lot of time, one person might feel it, the other person may not, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier the splitting. I was thinking of twin flames and whether that exists or not, that we are one entity split in half and we find each other together. Who knows, But all I know is, I like the way Mark Manson says, if it isn't a fuck yes, it's a hell no. And,
right. You're in or you're out.
Yeah.
Right?
You're, you know what? Thank you. That's exactly it. You're either all in and I'm going to go fucking balls to the walls. And what I mean is with intentionality, with compassion, with empathy, either go in that way. The problem is, if you're unconscious to the real understanding of the makeup of a relation, the difference with the lobster, I just want to make a reference to that because, lobsters aren't dealing with, childhood wounds, adult traumas.
Lobsters don't have relationships. Lobsters have domination, right?
Exactly.
Just to be clear.
Exactly. So thank you. And short of even, our closest primates, or, closest species next to us, we have way more complication to be in relationship with. Mating is easy. That's lots of people tonight are going to be mating that will never see each other again.
That's right.
But relationship's a whole nother story. So,
but that's the beauty of it, Jonathon. That's where I think that when you find a relationship where you connect with, because of all of the complexity, right? We were talking at the very beginning of our conversation about the immeasurable quality of the mind, and the universe that is our brain. To find someone else where they say we vibe together or we're on the same wavelength, we connect, right? Even those words, even that language implies that there's a mental connection between what's happening in our mind and what's happening in the mind of our partner, where you can see these transparent waves of energy go back and forth, right? That you connect. So I think you're right that because we are so complex, because humans have so much background, and because we have so much thinking that we do, when you find someone that you can be as complex with,
Yeah.
it's astonishing.
Oh my God, that's why I said fucking awesome best friend, is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
when it's
yeah.
like when you just can't get enough of this person, not from a lust or limerence perspective, certainly, it's great to have a physical connection, but to really have an intellectual connection, to have an emotional connection, to have a spiritual connection, to even have a creative connection, which I think of
Mm-hmm.
humor in that vein. When you can be running on those cylinders, in relationship, that's something to really, to protect and to nurture. And sadly, most couples don't get there. They don't.
Right.
Because it starts with, and I'm going to be cheesy again, it starts with
It's
this.
fine. Yeah.
It
Starts
starts
with
with
their
self love.
self-love.
And I know, people might hear that, guys might hear that and think it's cheesy. And I'll just say that when I think of self love, I think of self worth. I think of
Yeah.
self esteem. I think of self confidence. I think of self reliance. I think of self discipline. And not from a selfish vantage point, but from a nurturing standpoint. Because what really self love is we all have a 6-year-old, emotional 6-year-old inside of us that's honestly scared shitless.
Yeah.
And a lot of men in particular, put up a lot of walls and bravado and armor around that scared little 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can actually embrace that 6-year-old with a shitload of love, it's an empowering place to be.
Right. Because
And
that's what every child wants. Every 6-year-old,
yeah,
every single 6-year-old on planet Earth wants to feel like their parents love them,
yeah,
that they value them, that they're protected and that they're safe, and they have the chance to grow and learn about themselves.
yeah,
It's so funny that you say that age, because as I get older, Jonathan, I want to be more like my 5-year-old self.
yeah,
Right. I say that a lot, right?
yeah,
That when you're 5, you have uh, language ability,
yeah,
you have an awareness of what's happening, but you have not yet um, read the script or the blueprint that they're giving you,
yeah,
right? And so you don't quite know what's out there. And truly, anything seems possible. I could be a lumberjack. I could go ride horses. I can be a cowboy. You dress up for Halloween. You can be anything.
yeah.
There's this openness about it. One of my favorite quotes from favorite artist quote is from Pablo Picasso,
Okay.
and he looked at all these kids drawing, and he says, "When I was their age, I could draw like Raphael, but it took me a lifetime to draw like them."
Mm.
Right? Because he needed to reclaim that childhood expression of authenticity and trueness about who he was.
Yeah.
And so for you to say, this idea of self-love for that younger 6-year-old, man, even if you didn't get it from your parents, you can still give it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing about relationships, I believe, is the most important relationship you're ever going to have is the relationship with yourself. And,
Mm.
and it's kind of bringing this full circle. I started this conversation talking about, well, other than I talked about psychedelics, but spirituality.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you go before you talk more
Okay,
about
well,
that,
we
but
can go
keep
down. But
going.
I talked about identity, and
Yeah.
and when I recognize that the most important relationship I'm ever going to have starts with self. It's like, and I wrote this in my book, and it's the analogy that you use when you're on the airplane. If the flight attendant always says, if you're traveling with small children, cabin pressure changes, oxygen mask will drop, and if you're traveling with small children, put it on yourself first. The idea is if we can think of love as the oxygen, if we start with self, we can take care of the people around
Other
us that
people.
we care
Mm-hmm.
about. And so that's the way I look at self love. And, from a relational standpoint, when you feel not arrogantly good about yourself, because our ego
Yeah.
can be a very
Yeah.
sophisticated, arrogant system, or worse, it can be such a fearful system that it doesn't feel worthy. So some people can act entitled and some don't act worthy. And that's where the vast majority of the population lives, in these two different poles. But when we can really adopt a place of genuine inner confidence, it's one of the reasons why Jordan Peterson wrote his book, particular, and it happened to be attractive to young men in particular, which is great,
Right.
And I love the first chapter. I believe it's all about clean up your room. It's a metaphor for clean up your life, but that whole book is an empowering book to love yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
And there are so many wonderful modalities. You talked about the Stoics earlier. There are a variety of teachers that I listened to over the years, and I encourage everybody. Tony Robbins calls it the hour of power. Whether it's listening to a podcast like Chris's, or reading a book, or taking a workshop, doing something for yourself every day to empower yourself, and also to really spend time healing our shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Be aware of it and to work on it, start from that vantage point. And all the other stuff will start dropping like dominoes. I mean,
it's funny. My very dear friend Michael Rosenthal. He was on my show. He's episode 3,
okay.
And he said he was telling me a lesson that he learned from one of his friends who had really progressed spiritually to a really interesting place. And he said, "No one's gonna love you as much as you." Right? That's what you talk about there in terms of, dedicating time to yourself and even Jordan Peterson said that. I love one of his things. He says, take care of yourself like you would take care of somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? To take care of yourself. So for you now, taking care of yourself seems to be, as you start exploring and pursuing your spirituality and where you're going with that, I'm really curious, how does that foundation help you love yourself even more?
So I think, what, let's think of what self-awareness is. I'm including self-love in the concept of the awareness of who you are. Like, what is that, And now the way I frame it, it's the awareness of our fears, our insecurities, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, our judgments, how our actions affect others, and our ability to shift to love whenever we're in emotional pain. Okay. So, because love is the highest of frequencies, coming back to frequencies, at least that's my interpretation. But self-awareness is the capacity, in my mind, is let's say you're an actor on a stage. Okay. The director is your ego telling you what to do. Okay. The other cast members are just reflections and mirrors of yourself. Okay. But self-awareness is the recognition that if you're sitting in the audience watching all this, that's what self-awareness is to me, to be able to see all of this going on.
See it all.
Like, you see it and you go, oh, that's just his ego telling him what to do. Oh, that's him trying to be competitive with that person. That's self-awareness. And to me, that's one of the most loving things you can do yourself. And one of the beauties of doing medicine is particularly psilocybin, because I always think of it as the laughing drug or laughing medicine, because it's especially when you're with people and you could just be sitting there going, man, my judgments are so fucking absurd. And you're just laughing at your humanity. You are laughing at the absurdity. Like, to watch the news, people are in gigantic fear, and I laugh with absurdity of how insane human beings treat one another. And I don't mean that with any, you don't hear with
callousness. No, but I get what you're saying, right? Because, when it's so funny. When I was just talking about this with this guy where, this man named Pete Turner, who's fantastic. He has his own show called The Break It Down Show. And we were talking about all the stuff you can't control, right?
Yeah.
So someone says, "Oh, this world's out of control."
Yeah.
I'm like, well, the world's out of your control. Yes, the world is out of your control. You have absolutely no control over the bee that's moving from one hive to the next to pollinate a flower.
Yeah.
You have no control over the tides today. You're right. You have no control over that. You have no control over what some douchebag is going to do in the middle of New York City.
Yeah.
You don't have any control over that. You're right. The world is out of your control. It's out of your control. But your world, there are certain things you can control. And I think what's interesting about what you said about medicine unlocking the spirituality is that it's still you.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like it's someone else. It's just that it allows you, I guess, to be that audience member looking at all the parts of the stagecraft of you, but you do it in a way that's from a different perspective than maybe you saw it before.
Yeah, it's interesting because control, by the way, it's funny, my girlfriend and I will go down that rabbit hole of perception around that concept. I think if I got really granular, how we react to things is about the only area that we have true control over of how we can react to those things in our outside world. Mm-hmm. So what's happening on the news and so forth. How I believe we have a choice on how we can react from an emotional perspective. I could be wrong, but that's the way I like to interpret it. Do I have control to pick this up and put this down? Yeah. I mean, to that extent. I always think of life like this. Where I'm standing today at this very moment is the most important place. And if I do a spiral, what's the next thing? And right now it's you. Like right now, our exchange is the most important thing to me right at this very moment. And for those watching, we're on a studio through an internet site and whatnot. We're hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from one another. And then I think about the people I love, whether my son who lives 500 feet over there, my girlfriend who lives 15 miles in that direction, my best friend who lives in 19 miles. I mean, those are the things most important to me. But even when I leave the house, like how do I show up within that sphere around me? Mm-hmm. And I do my best to operate from a place of loving myself and loving everyone else. And that's hard for many people to do. We can have such judgments and negativity around people some people we've never met, a lot of politicians. It saddens me that, that so much angst a person might experience in their life over people they've never met.
Right.
And so I've just adopted to do my best to operate from a place of loving myself and everyone else. And my podcast on Apple is called the What Would Love Do podcast.
I love it.
And it's the idea of it's my YouTube videos for dating and relationships, but it always from the premise of like, okay, how can we do this from a place of love? It's a question. I mean, I'll let everyone else can decide that for themselves. But I think if we can, like when my girlfriend said to me, how can you operate from a place? She said two things I want from you in our relationship. Say what you mean what you say, and always come from love. And I work on being in that state. It's not easy. I want to say to everyone, this isn't easy. It's so easy to come from judgment or
dude, if it'd be easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
And the world would be a much different place.
Well, here's the thing. We all have the darn capacity. It's do you want to do it?
Right.
And sadly, and by the way, I believe that there are serial killers for a reason, that there are bad people for all that. I subscribe to that, whether I'm true or accurate or not. as I said before, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I mean, I believe we're all here having that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so I hope that, and I know your podcast has value. You're talking to men, encouraging, just inspiring enlightenment, inspiring consciousness, inspiring genuine intentionality.
Right.
And it's such a juicy world when you can come at it. I believe it's when you can come at it from a place of really understanding your emotions and how much they guide and affect your life, and really embracing every experience and not making the worst thing. Like, I mean, I've had several terrible things happen to me,
Right. But
and
you didn't
and I'm
let that define you.
yeah,
You created an identity around that.
yeah. I mean, it's created so many juicy things for me.
Right.
And I just want to encourage. That's why I want to, like, I jump on these podcasts because I just want to talk to everybody. You have the power within you, just like Neo did in the Matrix, to
Mm-hmm.
break free from all of this, the pain and suffering of the scripts that we've been told, and
Yeah.
find
No,
that
that
journey for
very
yourself.
true. Yeah, and find that journey for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Go into the wilderness, because what happens is when you leave the wilderness, you're transformed.
Yeah.
And when the hero is transformed and he goes back to the tribe, he comes back with new lessons for the tribe. Right? I mean, it's a true story.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So I've got one final question for you, Jonathan.
Sure.
Who is someone that you know that I don't know that I should know?
I mean, I could go down the. Who do I know that I think you should know? I don't know why my one of my dearest friends, who's also a coach. She's it's a woman. I mean, do you want a
Sure.
man or a woman?
Doesn't matter. Just someone you know that I should know based on our conversation.
I love Sabrina Rising. She's taking on her psychic channeling experiences as an oracle, and she gives me so much beautiful wisdom. We have our own mastermind together. We get together once every other week. I mean, I don't know why she was the first person. I'm sure there's others, but
but I love that's the instinct, like the first person, Sabrina Rising. I'd love to meet Sabrina.
Well, I'll make sure to connect the two of you. And she's she was my coach for a while, became a friend. Now we're friends with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go to her for perspective because she's brilliant, particularly when it comes to helping you identify your feelings. Like, she has a laser way to just know what you're feeling and how to bring it out of you. And if you can't get it out of yourself, she'll help you with the languaging, because that's where I think most people struggle, is really drawing out of themselves what are they actually feeling, and then saying it in a way to someone else that can be seen, heard, and understood.
Right.
That takes ninja level practice.
Yeah, it takes practice, and I bet Sabrina's someone who can just see it in people.
She just has that
like sees an aura. She just sees it. Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd love to meet her.
Well, I'm going to introduce you, and maybe you can have her on your show.
That'd be delightful. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed spending time with you, and I hope we get to keep in touch.
Yeah, likewise. I've enjoyed this, and I'm going to. And I just want to say, this has been, and I do quite a bit of interviews, but first off, you're a great interviewer. I want everyone to know that.
Thank you.
And you're a delightful person. But most importantly, I really just want to say you're doing great work, because I think the more we can talk about these things called, feelings and stuff like that, and life, my hope is we make a difference in someone's life today.
That's the hope, right? That's why we do it. Jonathan, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Likewise, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Jonathon Aslay. Goodness gracious. What, God, what a story. What a man who is aware enough to know that when he rebuilt his life, he was going to rebuild it in a different way. What a man to recognize that he had to dig into his own depths and realize that love was the path forward. And it's not just love towards other people. It's a self-love, his own book, Self-Love, right? Figuring out how to be compassionate to yourself. So what did we learn from Jonathon? Well, I learned that the identity you build yourself can be reconstructed and built again. You can bring things from your past life into this life. And the architecture of your life and the scaffolding is yours to build and rebuild if needed, and tear down and rebuild. It's yours. You get to do with it what you wish. And the question is, how much love can you give yourself to go through that exercise and to figure out the kind of man that you want to be? He changed completely. He made himself into a brand new man, living a brand new life. And I think that's a beautiful transformation, a beautiful transition. Maybe getting back to the place where he originally wanted to be. And the man that was a more authentic version of himself. Someone who's curious and loving and understands that how to feel his own feelings. And in that way is a path towards, his North Star, his truest self, his happiest self, his most loving self. Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Visit menfolkjourneys.com. Word bid falarid.